Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is Game 8 from the 2021 FIDE World Chess Championship match between Magnus Carlsen playing on the white end and Ian Nepomniachtchi. Going into Game 8, Carlsen leads 4-3 in this race to 7.5. Let's have a look. Another e4 by Carlsen. So far throughout this match, he's been alternating d4, then e4. We follow Game 2, another Petrov's defense. In that game, play continued with knight takes e5, the e-pawns exchanged, a ram structure was present. In this game, d4 is on board, noted as the modern attack. Knight takes e, pressure on the knight, some defense of the knight, both knights now invasive to one another. In both posts are addressed by the queen knights. The knights in this game are quick to observe from the sidelines, and after these 8 moves we have on board a symmetrical position. Both kings still in the center on an open file, so naturally, what do? In this game, white castles and black doesn't castle. Important not to just copy white's last move. This would be a problem. Why? Because of that. White's hitting here and there. How do you deal with it? The only way to stop the loss of material would be to play f5, but that's not without its issues. This would be a serious positional concession. e5 is now a big hole. As soon as that weakness is created in black's camp, this is one of the thoughts that should run through a player's mind. Which minor piece exchanges are benefiting me? Which ones will be desirable? Without question, it would be the dark square bishops. This is the bad guy, this is the good guy. This good guy watches over e5. And without this bishop around, white would be able to look forward to pivoting about on the e5 square. Let me put some moves on to show how white can maybe try and take advantage of the e5 square. Step 1. Get in tension with this bishop. Maybe even you get into an ending. And here you go. There goes the rook. You can't get rid of it with the pawn, and if it's so annoying you have to get rid of it with the piece, well, now there's a new issue. That's not just any passed pawn, it's a connected passed pawn. Super valuable. I don't know the assessment of this position. I just know that white's playing for, white is in the driver's seat. 19 moves down the road. The main point, castles, queen h5, f5, problem on e5. And it seems like it could be exploited. All right. So, what does black come up with? Creative move, without question, h5. About 17 minutes invested into that move. Well, this certainly keeps the queen out of h5. The rook's now defending that square. But a question here is, can't black play queen h4? If this was looking pretty good after castles, striking at these two, why can't this queen play to h4 right now and do similar, striking at h2 and d4? Well, it's not the same. Why not? Well, after g3, queen takes d4, white can get the pawn back with bishop c3. And that pawn is won back. It's not just any pawn, that's the heart of black's kingside structure. White is doing excellent in this position. Maybe a check, maybe win the pawn, maybe even win the exchange, right? Right? Even if you move this pawn, isn't this rook dead soon? These bishops cover a lot of ground. All right, my point here is that this is met with g3, and we could get the pawn back after queen takes d4. So it is h5. And now white has a good think. About 40 minutes was spent on Carlsen's 10th move. He's experiencing some difficulties. He has some problems to solve. One move later, this may appear, and it could be a bit more effective. So let's say, for example, we go with the most natural-looking move, rook e1 check. Best would be to go uncastled. Now, the king is defending g7 in the event of this queen h4, g3, chop. Bishop c3 isn't working anymore. The king's defending that point. So, what do we do about queen h4? If you develop the queen, right? There's this, you could play g3 or h3. It's unclear, this position. Black's up a pawn, it's not like white is losing, but yeah, certainly unclear. Also, let's say white attempts to defend this pawn, preparing to meet queen h4 with g3. Well, now the queen slides in here. Nearby there's h4. The bishops are pointing near the king, the queen is pointing near the king, and this rook can soon be pointing near the king after this exchange. Do you really want to, as white, underdeveloped to drive the queen back? This queen stands better than the white queen. This is still nearby. Black can castle by hand. Healthy moves, f6, king f7. Rooks are connected. One final note. If the queen is allowed to go here and you play h3 instead, staying out of the way of this pawn advancing and creating tension to pry open the h-file, black would be winning with this sacrifice. Not only threatening this familiar four-move checkmate pattern, bishop h2, bishop g3, queen h2, queen f2, but also queen takes bishop. So, what does he come up with? Not the most natural move. Queen e1. This is rare. This battery is showing up. It's rare to, it's more common to see this sort of battery, right, in some positions where you're attempting to exchange off a fianchettoed bishop. But the idea here is to exchange off the bishop in this way. King f8 follows. This was the big problem in many of those variations I was highlighting, right? With the queen coming out to h4. So he's trying to get rid of this guy. Very clever. Bishop b4 follows. This again is a bad for good bishop exchange. You don't have to have this e5 squares a hole for that to be the case. We can determine good bad bishops by this structure alone in the center. So from here we have queen e7. White elects to keep the queens on board. Only a dark square bishop exchange happens at this stage. If we're exchanging queens and trying to play for a win in this position, on one hand, white can say, I have the better bishop, but black is saying, I have a really active king in the center on a dark, stable square, and you're never kicking me off of this post. This is an even position. So the queens stay on board. White's going to try and cause a problem for the king. And in a way, this rook, right? It's going to be maybe a little bit tricky for the rook to get activated. So first things first, vacate e1. Mission accomplished on this square. It's opened for the white rooks. Rook to e8, rook a to e1, rook to h6, and given just one more move, black will be perfectly fine. So for example, let's say if white strengthens the queenside structure, defends d4, this rook plays here, and it's likely all rooks are off, and we have a queen bishop ending alone. Is it enough having only this better bishop? Probably not. White tries to cause some problems. He sees this plan and says, I'm going to give your rook a responsibility. Some pressure on h5. Not so fast. Some support of d5. This frees up the queen to challenge the white queen. One rook exchange. Open file. White ducks the exchange. You really don't get anywhere if we have this ending. Too simplified, no great, not enough of an imbalance is present in this position. So the queens stick around. Queen e3, threatening mate, bishop d7. Flight square for white. Black now clamps down on white's kingside structure. Having this pawn on h4 may one day pave the way for a perpetual check, pivoting on f4 and c1, continually striking at the king. All right, that's a ways down the road. From here, c4, some tension on the queen side. Considered one of the best moves in the engine's eyes is to play, you ready for this one? g5. This opens up g7 for the king and also hints at maybe playing g4. I had a look at some lines where the queen goes hunting for these pawns over here, and that's where black can consider g4 and h3 and work with these three attacking the king. G5, not the most human move, of course. You have to calculate what's going to happen after this, and then queen e5. This is now a target. Seems like this queen is intolerable. You'd have to get rid of it. Do you have a good answer to this one, this double attack? You'd have to calculate many moves deep. The computer assesses it as about equal. All right, I don't want to go down that line. I believe the train of thought here, well, one line of thought is, I don't want to have to babysit a pawn on d5. Instead, I'll saddle you with an isolated pawn, and I'll be okay with inviting this bishop on this diagonal pointing towards my king. This is what was played in the game. Black captures, we have the recapture. And next up, move 21, this is where there's a mistake by black. You'll notice that with the bishop on c4, there's now a new key move available to white with the queen. And that key move is queen a3, where she really does function like a queen, striking in multiple directions, targeting a7, unprotected. The move played in the game is b5. Now, considered best is king g8. If queen e7 follows, right, trying to take advantage of the weakness of the last move, king's no longer there, black can meet this with bishop to e6, and we're either going to have a bishop exchange or a queen exchange. No time to go hunting for this. This guy would fall. And also no time to take the bishop because the queen would fall. Considered best is the queen exchange, a bishop exchange, and this rook ending is a draw with some accurate move. It's important to play rook h6 in this position and go from here. Trying to defend with g5, that runs into some problems with rook g4. Not easy to defend this pawn. There's that. And even if you defend it from the side, there's still this one. If you enter a king and pawn ending, black would be losing. This pawn gets hunted, g3 is in, this pawn runs. Outside passed pawn for the win. So, king g8 not played. b5, bishop's under fire, where should it go? Nowhere. Queen a3 hits with check. And this queen is ready to go into Pac-Man mode, targeting a7 and then the unprotected bishop. What do you do as black? If you block the check and secure the bishop, you still don't have to react to this threat. White would still be able to take on a7. If pawn takes bishop, black gets mated. Queen a8. You take the pieces when they block. So, in the game, it's king g8. Queen takes a7. What follows is queen d8, securing the bishop and stopping any back rank checks. So white is now currently up a pawn, still has to address the pressure on the bishop. If black tried something else instead of this one, let's say a desperado sacrifice, bishop takes h3, right? If you just take right back, maybe you take like this or insert a check first. Here's how white can follow. This is a nice move. Queen takes f7. Queen takes queen. Can be met with rook check. Then you get the queen. You're up a pawn. You're on this. And white is, up a pawn. Very active pieces. So the bishop takes on h3 isn't quite working. Here's another cool variation. Let's look at this check. If bishop takes h3 instead of this queen d8, here's another interesting variation. Let's say check was played first, and then bishop takes on f7. This is an interesting position because black has only one move, which draws, and white, in reply, only has one move, which draws. What is the draw here? Here it is. Rook g6. This is a draw now. If white captures the rook, look at this. The rook is hit, and we're threatening mate. Black wins. There's only one move that draws for white. What is it? It's rook h8. The queen comes to the back rank, gives a check, gives another check, forces the king here. So now there's no longer a pin. Now you could take the rook and finally take the bishop. Those are some pretty slick lines. I certainly didn't find all of that. I have a good friend in Stockfish 14, but yeah, neat in my estimation. Okay. Queen d8 in this game. No desperado sacrifice. On the defensive is black. Bishop backs off. Secure square, still observing f7. Rook d6 follows. The rook is now improved, gives the queen a responsibility. This guy is so good, black is saying, I need to get rid of it. So bishop e6, both bishop and rook are exchanged, and we have a queen ending with white up an extra pawn. First centralization, queen a5. What's the plan for white in general? The main one is don't allow a perpetual check and try and keep your queen in a good position to watch over any of your pawns that are unprotected. So each side goes hunting for pawns. Queen takes c. Check. The f pawn is picked up. The e pawn falls. White's now up 2 pawns. And let's see how white tries to convert this. First, staying very central with the queen. This is a very effective post in combating a perpetual check. We can see that because after the move b3, there isn't a fear of g3 check and queen e1 check. We have that one covered. We also have the e3 check covered. A great post for the queen. b3, what's the idea? White is okay with giving up the a pawn. It's captured. And white hunts the b pawn. First with the check. There you go. Still up 2 pawns. Back to central, stopping any checks altogether. Some repositioning to now d2. Support of the pawns. Is white now ready to advance like so? I thought in this position, maybe you can play queen to d1, but I found this next move by Carlsen instructive. Here's another neat post by the queen where she observes e1 and c1, which are necessary follow-up checks for the queen if black wants to get a perpetual check in there, right? g3 and then e1, or if the queen is on f4 and c1, yeah, the queen has them covered. Queen does a good job on a dark square in controlling these dark squares. She covers a blend of squares, both color complexes, but more dark than light, being on a dark square. So, okay, queen f4, king g1, and in the end, the queen decides to go back home, just like black did a bit ago. And from this post, she's stopping any perpetual checks and keeping a watchful eye over both pawns. That's the main idea, and she's very effective from d1. So queen e3, king h1. Also, she watches over the g4 square in the event that black tries to create some tension. She may have the option to capture on g4. Black plays g5, white runs, black continues to push, and white captures with the pawn. So this structure is going to be broken down a little bit. Right, after this we have h3. If white tries to keep the structure as is, capturing with the queen, this would be a draw, because now white is subjected to checks on the back rank with queen e1, queen e5, queen e1, and if you want to get out of this perpetual check, you would have to play g3, but now you would be vulnerable on the second rank to queen b2, queen c1, queen d2, and if you want to stop these checks, you'd have to block with the queen, but then there's this check. This is a drawn ending. So, careful. Don't leave the back rank. White captures in this game with the pawn on g4. Black gets in h3. And after queen f3, this game goes no further. Black resigns. The queen is perfectly placed on f3, defending all pawns and securing the king against any perpetual check ideas. So, for example, if play continued from here after queen f3, let's say there's this check and black gives another check, eventually they're going to run out, and we get to see just how effective the queen is on f3. No checks along the rank. You can't get to f1 or h1 because of the queen. No checks here, the pawn blocks. Even if the pawn moves, you still can't get on that diagonal. e6 is covered. The only way is to maybe get on the h-file, but you're still 2 moves out, and white, don't forget, has some ways to improve their queen. Giving check, maybe forcing a queen exchange. Let me try some attempt from this position. Let's say the king goes here, sidestepping any great white queen checks here. So let's say g6. Let me make another passing move. It's not the greatest move, but just to illustrate one variation, you can have a queen exchange like that. The main point at the end of the day is to recognize the very strong post of the white queen in this final position. Well, not the final position of the game, but we can easily get to this point right here where again, everything is defended and there's no perpetual checks. And white will easily be able to make progress running with one of the pawns and forcing a queen exchange somehow or another. It's an impossible task for black. But he goes no further. Queen f3, final move in this game 8, and a huge score for Carlsen now going into the rest of the day. 5-3 going into game 9. Nepomniachtchi only has 3 more, I would say, 3 more tries, 3 more games with the white pieces, and he needs to make up a lot of ground fast. So we will see what happens. It is still not over. A big edge for Carlsen, clearly up 2 clear points. Tailed the tape on this one. There we go. It was an edge for Carlsen throughout, and right here, after bishop takes c4, boom, b5. That was the big mistake. Not the blunder, but the... Yeah, this one is the one that registered as the mistake. The blunder later on, I think, was considered rook d6, but the main issue in this game was the b5 advance instead of putting the king on g8. At the end of the day, what do we have? A couple inaccuracies for Carlsen, a mistake and a blunder for Team Black, Nepomniachtchi, and average centipawn loss of 20 and 32 for each. Okay, as usual, feel free to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. Hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.